Welcome to the Human Experience Podcast, the only podcast designed to fuse your left and right brain hemispheres and feed it the most entertaining and mentally engaging topics on the planet. As we approach our ascent, please make sure your frontal, temporal and occipital lobes are in their full upright position. As you take your seat of consciousness, relax your senses and allow us to take you on a journey. We are the Intimate Strangers. Thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for your presence this evening. We've got an incredible show planned for you guys tonight. We are multicasting. If you are looking for Everywhere We Are Live, if you want to leave us a review on iTunes, if you want to support the show, help us out, just go to allmylinks.com/thehumanxp. But by far, the biggest compliment that you can give us is by spreading the word about this show. Word of mouth is how we grow. But if you have not heard the show before, you're in for a treat. Tonight, we are going to be demystifying the notions of coincidence. We are going to be looking at the way synchronicities work and why they happen. We're going to be looking at the roles these events seem to play in our lives. So whether you are here with us live or listening to a replay or the podcast version of this, thank you so much for your presence tonight. Much love to our loyal fans out there. We appreciate you so very much. Nevertheless, sit back, grab a drink, and enjoy this conversation. The Human Experience is in session. My name is Xavier Katana. My guest for tonight is Dr. Bernard Beitman. Dr. Beitman is a psychiatrist, author, and researcher. He is widely regarded as the first psychiatrist since Carl Jung to systemize the study of coincidences and add scientific rigor to the term synchronicity. He developed the first valid scale to measure coincidence sensitivity. Dr. Bernard has written several books, one of which received 2 national awards. He's internationally known for his research in panic disorder. He attended Yale Medical School and completed his residency at the University of Stanford. Dr. Bernard, it's such a pleasure to have you on the program, sir. Welcome to HXP.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Bernard, I love this book. I've heard so much about synchronicity, especially in the last several years or so. I think this has become more of a meme, as it were, but I know the term comes from Carl Jung. Carl Jung termed this phrase. So if you would just give us a little bit of a background of how you got into this work, because you're a psychiatrist, you're a practicing psychiatrist, and also the definition of synchronicity for anyone that doesn't know what that means, please.
It's an important question. What do we mean by several of the terms? First of all, we can start with the word coincidence. What do we mean by the word coincidence becomes our first question. And what we're studying is meaningful coincidences, ones that somehow seem to have some meaning to the person who is experiencing them. There's 3 other words to pay attention to: synchronicity, serendipity, and a lesser-known word called seriality. And I'll go through all of those because I'm glad you start with how we define these, because that's where we should start.
Sure.
A coincidence by itself, a remarkable concurrence of events without apparent causal connection. In other words, there might be a cause, but it is not apparent. And that's a kind of a teasing definition of the word. There are other ways people use the term. Sometimes they add They add adjectives that make a difference in the way the person thinks about it. But the adjectives can be coincidental, mere, only, pure, true, and just. And these suggest that the coincidence should be disregarded. Remember, the dictionary definition says we don't know what the cause is, no apparent cause, implying that there might be. And I have been drawn by wondering, well, what might have made them happen? And for those that we want to pay attention to and suggest there might be something to them, we call them meaningful, remarkable, and amazing. And those adjectives draw our attention to them. From the word coincidence comes some funny phrases. There are no coincidences, say some people.
Sure.
And what does that mean? I mean, it's a kind of a tantalizing phrase that's almost as ambiguous as the definition I read about whether there's a cause or not. When you say there are no coincidences, you may mean that you know the cause. Again, remember the definition said no apparent cause. So now you know the cause because you can say there are no coincidences. Once you know the cause, there are no coincidences. And what are the two major beliefs about cause of coincidence, Xavier? Well, one is God. And that's the most popular one because a lot of people like to say, quote Einstein, but I'm not sure that was who started it. Coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous.
I love that.
When you look at that phrase, coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. God is no longer anonymous.
Right. And I mean, you could even say that God speaks in synchronicity, right?
People say that. That God is speaking to you through coincidences. The Bible, both the Old Testament and the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, have lots of coincidences in them, and so do the world's major religions have lots of coincidences in them. They are part of religious lore. So God is often invoked as having something to do with making them happen. If you believe in God, God is the final cause, and there is no argument about the cause because God, in this way of thinking, is the final cause. And that may be. I think there are lots of questions for us to answer about the nature of reality. And some of them are like, why are we here?
Yeah.
What's going on around here?
For sure.
How did we get here? What is my purpose in life?
Right.
Why are human beings around here? Well, coincidences give us clues to all of those. But once you say God does it all, it stops there. But I am interested in the variables that get to that final cause, if that's where it is, because there are many variables that influence what I call coincidentiality, that is the predisposition to experience coincidences. But let's go back to the original question of what do we mean by these terms, meaningful coincidence and the other words that I bring in. And there are four words that coincidentally thank you, all begin with an S and end in an ITY. Four key words revolving around meaningful coincidences, all beginning with an S and ending with an ITY. The first one is synchronicity.
Right.
The second is serendipity. The third is seriality. That's from Paul Kammerer in 1919.
Okay.
And the fourth is a word I made up called simulpathity.
Ah, okay.
And the word simulpathity is based on the experience of many people. It happened to me once, and that's got me started in this, or really going in coincidences. Simulpathity refers to the experience of the pain of a loved one at a distance.
Okay. So,
Go ahead.
So someone that you love or care about is going through some sort of emotional trauma, and you, for some unknown reason, you feel it, you pick up on it. It's like your antenna is ringing, and you reach out to them and you confirm that there is in fact something going on.
Right. And you can feel it in lots of different ways. In your body is mostly where simulpathity comes, but you can also feel it in your mind. You may be experiencing, as I did, the pain of the loved one that the loved one is experiencing. What happened to me was that I was standing over a sink in San Francisco on Hayes Street in the Fillmore District, if you know San Francisco, in an old Victorian at the kitchen sink, and I was choking uncontrollably. And it was 11 p.m. on February 26th, 1972.
Oh, no.
And 1971. And I couldn't stop. Something was in my throat. I couldn't stop. I co-wrote a song about this called Carl was choking on his own blood is the title, which is what happened because my father, 3,000 miles away at 2 a.m. in Wilmington, Delaware, was choking on his own blood and dying.
Oh, my God.
That's the kind of thing that gets one's attention.
Yeah.
My brother called me the next day and told me, and it turned out the next day was February 27th, which also happened to be my birthday.
Wow.
It's a sort of thing that you want to look into if you're curious, like I was, and it stayed with me all these years and was one of the drivers for writing the book, Connecting with Coincidence. It's one of the drivers that keeps me interested in all this, trying to understand how these things happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great line of questioning and thought, and my condolences, but it woke you up to this notion that things are connected, people are connected, perhaps everything is connected, perhaps, God, and I refer to God as a sort of intelligence. I don't view God as this person in the sky that's judging, what we're doing. It's more of, I don't know. It's more of the moment here now, the space between me and you and me speaking right now. God is everything, right? So when we sort of open our eyes to the reality in front of us, it's almost like a feedback loop of information that you can use, as you said, to gain clues about your life, about which choices to make, about which directions to go. And it's amazing how those kind of play out. And, it's really mysterious. And that's why I think it's so amazing that you've written this book and sort of followed in the path of Carl Jung. I don't think anyone else has taken this path. So I'm really glad that you have done this, but tell us more. So when, you talk, let's move into love. You talk about love. It's the first chapter in your book, right? Romance. Let's say that you encounter someone that you feel a mysterious connection to. You're just magnetically pulled towards this person. You don't know why. And, in the book, you have several different examples. I think there's one, please forgive me if I butcher this, but I think in one of the examples, there's a guy, he doesn't know why, and he just goes up to this woman and he says, I think I might know you. Please give me your number. She does, and they end up, falling in love. How does it work? I mean, why do we feel connected to certain people? Why do we feel this magnetic resonance to people?
Maybe the musical, old musical South Pacific.
No.
You don't. Well, there's a song in there that goes, "Some enchanted evening, you will see a stranger. You will see a stranger across a crowded room. And somehow you'll know even then." And that's the kind of thing that happens with people. Why it happens becomes a mystery in itself. That you recognize it becomes what's so important. That there is someone there that you need to be with. The story you might have been talking about was a man was in an airport and saw a woman walking by him, and somehow he asked her, just like that, just like the song. And they stayed married for 20 years, but they didn't stay married forever. They were in their lives together, helped each other a lot, and that was that. That they each went on their separate ways. And this challenges the notion of we're meant to be, and what meant to be means forever. Forever is a long, long time, and people hold on to what happened as something that means they have to keep going. And it really isn't the case anymore, particularly as people live longer. But why it happens, how they're brought together. I mean, I love the story of a guy riding around on his motorcycle in a Caribbean island. He was bored with all the jobs he was doing in a hotel where a lot of women liked him, but he didn't like them. And he just went for a motorcycle ride, and there on the beach was a woman all by herself, and he rode up to her and blah, blah, blah. That's how it happened. I don't know the mechanics of it. And people talk about past lives and stuff. I think it's worthy of a scientific experiment, because first we have to establish that this happens. And the song I sang and all the stories suggest, yes, it definitely happens. And the problem is, what do we do with it once it happens?
Right.
And I've had stories of people just relying on the coincidences between them to keep them together. But that ain't going to work, baby. That ain't going to be the way it's going to happen. Right. You got to then do, if any of our listeners are married, it's work.
It's work.
It's work. You gotta learn something called tolerance of each other, and you got to learn something like, when she says or he says, "We got to talk, honey," you can't run away. Right. You've got to talk things out. And these people I'm talking about lasted for 10 years maybe, which is pretty good, but they never bothered to do the things I just mentioned.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that's really important. I think you nailed it. These coincidences, these synchronicities can attract these specific people into our lives, and perhaps they create this environment in which these connections happen. But, at the end of the day, there's this old Buddhist, quote, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." Same exact thing. When it's not like this magical journey that happens when you find, say, it's your soulmate or the love of your life. You're going to have to do that work, chop wood and carry water, perhaps even together. Maybe one of you chop wood, maybe the other one carries water. But that's going to have to happen either way, right? So, something else that you mentioned in the book is that sometimes these types of coincidences line up, and these people enter your life for a specific purpose, and then they exit your life.
Right.
Why does that take place?
Well, when you ask why do birds sing so sweet and lovers await the break of day? I mean, why do people fall in love? Yeah. We don't know why. Why is one of those, why is the sky blue questions?
Right.
Why is a tough one? But I think it's an important question, and I want to try to answer it, because it has to do with, why are we here? Xavier, why are you here? What is your purpose on being in this planet, on this planet? What is my purpose? Mine is, I got it now. I got to establish coincidence studies. So I'm really glad that you invited me to be on the show because that's my job.
Right.
I've got to get coincidence studies going in a way that brings people together to try to understand this stuff, these synchronicities, these serendipities, try to be able to figure out how they work and how you can use them. That's my job. Your job includes what you're doing now with this show. I so much appreciate being on it and hearing your questions. When you ask why are people brought into your lives, I have a radio show myself called Connecting with Coincidence. And this morning when I was interviewing someone, it happened again that she teaches me things about myself. She teaches me things about how the world works. And she made it clear to me today, for example, that anger, if you get angry, look at the possibility there has been a boundary violation in you by the other person. And think of intuition as something that's there to help you. And these were clarifications to me that I could use at this time. And this happens to me with people on the radio show. It happens with some of my patients where they teach me things that I need to know at this time. Now, I'm a little bit of a weirdo in a lot of ways, but maybe I'm not so weird, and that's what I want to hear from you, is that I think there is this Earth University that we are here to learn about this reality and our place in it. So when people come into our lives, my view is they're here to help you learn, become more spiritually and psychologically developed. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm so glad that you asked, you put that question forward to me because, I really do sit with the material. When a guest comes on to the show, I really do my best to absorb as much of it as I can. And I sit and I'll cycle sort of questions in my mind. And, while I was reading your book, this idea came into my head, and I've thought about this before, but it was so clear in this moment, in this meditation that I was doing. It was so clear the way I saw it. It was that, perhaps we're in a computer. Perhaps this is a simulation. Perhaps there's different programs that are running, and perhaps, this tunnel of light that we see, perhaps that's just exiting the so-called matrix. I mean, you even use that word, the matrix. You could say matrix is connecting different events together. But, I agree. I think this is a place that we come to learn, to experience the human experience. And I think, some people enter our lives for sure, to teach us different things so that we can learn, so that we can grow, so that we can evolve. In the book, let
me pause there for a second, because I am hoping and anticipating and believing and seeing that our conversation is going to help each other in this psychological and spiritual development. And one of the ways I just heard that happening is you talking about the simulation. And one because there are different words for it. I use the term psychosphere, our mental atmosphere, which we can come back to. It's a very dynamic thing, but that coincidences are clues to how that simulation works. They're clues to how the simulation works, because there is something going on, and we don't know what it is. Do you, Mr. Jones? We don't know what it is. And I am curious, and you are curious, and our listeners are curious. We want to know what's happening. And one way to think about that, there is a simulation, or there is a psychosphere, our mental atmosphere, and these coincidences are hints about how the things work.
Okay. I mean, there's so many different things that I want to ask you right now, but let me try. I'll do my best to sort of synthesize, and wrap that up as much as I can. Okay. So in the book, you talk about generating these synchronicities or coincidences. Do you think that, and you mentioned that if you if you alter your pattern of doing things, like let's say you're on a schedule, a 9 to 5 sort of schedule where you do everything the same way every single day. There was a project that I was involved with for a short time where we were using a quantum number generator to assign geolocation data to certain points to exhibit exactly that, to create exactly that event, to bring you out of your everyday sort of, operation. So why do you think that is? Do you think you're...
run that by me again, because I didn't quite follow it. Because I love this is such an important question you're asking. And if you've got a computer model to model this, I think that's really groovy.
Okay. So have you heard of the Global Consciousness Project, Dr. Roger Nelson? Okay, perfect. We've had him on the show. He basically runs this quantum computer, and it basically just spits out numbers, just random numbers, and it got me quote unquote random. And so some friends and I, we coded this sort of bot, this robot that would connect, it would pull a string from that quantum number generator and then apply that to a latitude and longitude on Google Maps, right? And we were trying to experiment with this, but for me, it was actually sort of an exercise in psychosis, because it makes you feel like, how can we determine what is meaningful and what isn't? How can we say, like, if we think everything has meaning, then where's the line? Where's there's some blur there, right? Does that make sense?
Well, yes. I've been able to try to tease apart the meaning of the word meaning in meaningful coincidence. It's very important, because the term meaning and meaningful is crucial to the way Jung thought about how coincidences are created. But I never saw how he defined meaning, because it has so many different meanings. It's fun to do that. There's an old book from the 1920s called The Meaning of Meaning that is still in press. Mm-hmm. So what do we mean by meaning becomes an important question. We can go down that, but I'd like to be able to talk about your question about being in a basic pattern in your life, and somehow doing something to that pattern increases coincidences. Now, this is a correlation I've been able to make by reading a lot of stories. And the correlation works something like this. Tear the web of quotidian reality and coincidences fly in.
Okay.
Tear the web of quotidian, of regular reality, and coincidences fly in. That's an image that I'd have our listeners and you pay attention to. It opens up some doors. And the correlates of tearing that web of quotidian reality include need, life stress, life change, and high emotion. Need, life stress, and high emotion. Mm-hmm. And many, if not most, of the coincidences that have impact, and that's one of the definitions of meaningful, is its impact. And some Jungians define synchronicity only, or call something a meaningful coincidence synchronicity only when it has an effect on the person's individuation, on that person's growth towards psychological and spiritual development. That's a very narrow definition, but some Jungians stick right to it, because it's such an important part of what synchronicities do for people.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, because, let's say, you find something like a battery or something, every day, but you can't figure out, what that battery means or something, or maybe there's someone that keeps dropping a battery, that's following you around or something. I don't know, but
has that happened to you?
No, definitely not. But
I had somebody who was talking about spirals following her around.
Okay, so one thing that I can for sure say that happens to me all the time is, I will see certain numbers in a pattern like 333 or 1111. I think this has become a phenomenon where, people, they see this and they have started to ascribe meaning to this 1111 sort of, it's become a meme. And, for me, this is amazing, Dr. Bernard, without, exaggeration, I really, truly mean this. Every time there is some sort of turbulent event in my life, before that happens, before that occurs, I will see the number 666. Just every time. I have no predilection towards the number 666. Like, I'm not enemies with the number 666. I get the idea, of all the spatial dimensions. I've studied Kabbalah. I get it. So, I'm not, there's no number racism happening with me in the number 666. But when I see that number, and something will go down, so I'm wondering, what you think, about this. And sometimes with other numbers, I've started to, for a long time, before I even really started to discover this work, I was always looking for different patterns. I think our brains are connecting, dots wherever they can anyway. Right? So, I would read like license plates and stuff like that and see if, I could connect some dots just as a game, as a thought experiment. So, I've started to...
I call it exercise.
Exercise, okay. So, what do you think about this?
The brain as a pattern recognizer is so crucial, and some people love patterns. I love finding patterns, and you're one of them, and I'm one of them. I like finding patterns. It's fun, and that number thing you were doing is fun to do because it does sharpen your ability to do it in other ways. The number one has been a conundrum for me for a long time. I had the number 23, which is not an uncommon happy number for people for quite a while. It was my football jersey. Had 32 was my home address, and a lot of other places that 23 and 32 were and 5 were around for me.
They made a movie about it.
Yeah, they did. And I think there's something to it, but there are so many numbers around, like on license plates. There are so many numbers in the media and in newspapers that you can find numbers. And, a stopped clock is right 2 times a day. There are, you're going to run it. I had a little nap today and I got up. It was 4:44. And I laugh at those. Those are funny when they happen. But when you describe 666 as a prodrome to some weird thing happening, I pay attention to that. Those are the ones I look for, where somebody who is a good observer pays attention to the correlation between the appearance of the number and something else. That becomes a correlation that is a signal for you that you got to start paying attention because something is about to happen. And that's really cool that you do that.
Right. So, okay. So, I mean, this leads me back. I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but I do want to move forward a little bit. But, this leads me back to this idea that we're in a video game. This is, like you talk about money. Let's talk about money. You talk about timely money in your book. And I love this, and you call them money packs, right? So it's kind of like an airdrop, like where maybe you're short on rent that month by $246, whatever the number is. And somehow, mysteriously, somehow it almost never fails. It's really strange. Independent of belief. It doesn't matter what you think about this. This will happen no matter what. So, I'm just, what is going on here? It does feel like, maybe there's an airdrop happening and here's maybe your higher self. And it's like, here you go. Here's exactly what you need to get by this month. Don't worry about it. Just keep going.
I wish it were that one-to-one correlation. In my experience, it isn't. It does happen. And again, why it happens is influenced by need, life changes, and high emotion. Because when you need money, like the way you're describing it, that's more likely to show up. A psychology graduate student named Mary Kay Landon in 1990, and this is in my book, Connecting with Coincidence, did a study cleverly called The Study of Unexpected Money, summarized as SUM, Study of Unexpected Money. It was clever. I'm not sure how she thought about that, but that's the right title for it. So she tried to figure out how it happened. Money that comes into your hands surprisingly and suddenly without your earning it, soliciting it, specifically seeking it out, or otherwise expecting it. It's a little different place from needing it. So she wanted to see what it took for people to be correlating that with actually getting the money. And you can read about the details in the book, but if you stay receptive and don't push and really need it, you're more likely to get it. And we've heard this lots of times, that if you're relaxed about it and you expect to get it, those are the two things that help you get there. Positive belief is very much part of making it happen, and they come through with prayers and other ways when you start thinking about it. We know too much that imagining something helps to make it happen, but that's not enough anymore. This was a study where people did things, but in life out here in the wild, you usually have to do something. You can't just imagine like $1,000 bill on the ceiling of your bedroom and look at it and It's going to come to you. It's not going to happen that way. You're going to have to do something. But then you're talking about those times, and they're in my book too, where suddenly it just happens. It's there. But some of the stories, if you look at them, have to do with praying to God for the money. And what happens is the person gets an intuitive feeling of going to a file cabinet and pulling out an unopened envelope. Mm-hmm. And there the money is. Mm-hmm. Well, it was money that the person had received but didn't open. So that person knew somehow that the money was there. It didn't just happen. She just had to recognize what she already knew. And I love these stories like this because they like to say it's some outside agency that brought them the money. But no, you did it yourself. You could find it. And I look for those situations that I can explain by the person doing it, because the trouble with the phrase, there are no coincidences, they either say it's random or it's God, but a lot of times you and I have something to do with making it happen. In fact, we're an important part of the players often.
Absolutely. I mean, there is no roadmap to any of this. So, we're kind of learning and adapting as we go along. But, it's interesting, and you talk about this in the book. And, we've had many of the people that were in the movie The Secret and that discussed, the law of attraction on this show. And this is something interesting that I like to think about at times. It's as if, let's say that you're generating a certain type of frequency. And, you even talk about it in this book as well. Like attracts like. It seems, that's the way it goes here. It's not that opposite attract. It's that like attracts like. So, if you're resonating at a certain frequency, you tend to attract that same frequency. Is that along the lines of your experience as well?
It's along the lines of my theorizing. Yes.
Okay.
The actuality of that gets us down to what do we mean by resonating, and what is it that's resonating, and what is resonating with, and those are questions. And Rupert Sheldrake has his way of talking about morphic resonance, which is a subset.
Yeah,
great. And he was on mine, and I had the pleasure of talking with him in person in British Columbia this summer. And he's a wonderful guy to talk with. What he knows about morphic resonance is very, very interesting, because he doesn't know what morphic fields are. Mm-hmm. He compares them to magnetism and electromagnetism, but magnetism before we knew what a magnetic field was. And he says that's what morphic fields are right now. He knows they're there, but he doesn't know what the structure of them is. I'm getting to think about different levels of vibration. And I'm looking at the strangeness of our reality when science only knows about 5% of what the universe is made out of. That the other 95% is made of dark energy and dark matter. And I don't hear people saying that it's just, it seems that I hear people implying that it's always out there, this dark matter and dark energy. But no, it's right here between us right now. Dark energy and dark matter are in all parts of the universe, and they're called dark because we don't know what they're made out of. And so for us to be guessing about what's going on around here would be based on not knowing what 5%, not 95% of the universe is made out of. But still, I go to the quantum ideas to start with, not to end with, that the universe is made up of not emptiness out there. The space is not empty, but there's a lot of little boing, 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 boing stuff going on there with a lot of little particles bouncing around in kind of a wild dance. Space is not empty. These things are moving around. And if we go from the little quantum particles and start thinking about how they come together, we begin to maybe go from a very, very ethereal to something as solid as us, as the microphone I'm holding, as the typewriter and the keyboard in front of me. These are solid things. So how do we go from those very spacey things, space part things, to where we are now? I'm just taking a simple version of the idea, saying it's vibrating at various different levels of density. And those different levels of vibration have, some of them, signature vibrations in them. So that you, Xavier, and I have signature vibrations that are like fingerprints for us. Mm-hmm. And those fingerprints can be resonating, those vibrations can be resonating well, not only with each other, but also with things. And somehow we can resonate at the right vibration. I'm back to what you were saying earlier, to be able to have things resonate with us and then move toward us.
Okay, wait. Okay, so resonate with certain things. Okay, so let me just play on that, and then if you could please expound on that a little bit. So let's say that there's someone who is, comfortable, as far as monetarily, we'll use that example, but they're dreaming. They're dreaming about having millions of dollars. They don't need millions of dollars. They're already surviving. They're doing well. But they've got these big dreams. They've got these big aspirations. About being rich. So perhaps that is not in the line of their vibration or their frequency. Does that make sense? Is that
definitely? Because the frequency, I think, is partly determined by what your role in life is.
Okay, so it makes me wonder about a lot of different things, about how things just play out in your life and direct you in certain ways. Dr. Bernard, have you ever? I'm sure you've experienced this, but have you ever had this happen where it seems like the directions that you're going, you just hit a wall? It's like no matter what you do, you hit wall after wall after wall after wall, and because life is almost forcing you to be at a certain place at a certain time, and you end up there, and then it's only after that situation you realize, when you look back. Steve Jobs talked about this a little bit in the realm of business, but I think it has to do with life as well, that we only understand things when we look back at them. When we look back at the event events and the way that they unfolded, then we understand them. But when we're in them, we're in the subjective state of them, it's very difficult to understand, like, okay, what's going on. But doesn't that put into question free will? I mean, I want to be able to have the choice to make these decisions, but if life is giving me these different walls and putting me here, then where's the free will at?
I like the phrase, we have free will, we have no other choice.
I love that.
That's Isaac Bashevis Singer. And that, the trouble with the question is it's a yes or no question. Is there free will or not? And it's the wrong question. It's the degree of free will we have, and it's measured by just how many options do we have at any particular moment. Some people in this world have such limited options that they are genetically and environmentally constrained by anything for them to exercise their thought, their beliefs, their desires. They just got to just do what's right in front of them. And some of that is almost by choice. People put themselves there, but there's so much poverty and oppression that a lot of people have trouble making those decisions. But even in those circumstances, there is some free will. But the question, and that it's the degree to which you can make a decision. Looking back, there's two things that you mentioned that I think need to be separated. Hitting a wall. Sometimes those are great things to happen. I was a faculty member at the University of Washington and wanted to get promoted, and they got rid of me. They wouldn't promote me. And it turned out to be great for me to get out of there. And I went on to be chairman at the University of Missouri-Columbia Psychiatry Department for like 17 years. And it wouldn't have happened if I stayed at the University of Washington.
Sure.
So hitting those walls are really useful. But then the free will question, I'm not sure how you bring in free will to the wall.
I mean, if life is putting these walls up so that you go a certain way, it's directing your will. It's directing your realm of choice. Like you said, degrees of free will. So it's like, okay, you have the choice to keep going a certain direction. And I find also that, sometimes lessons will be repeated until they are learned.
Oh yeah.
So it's it will it's a spiral. It's not really, a circle. It's more of like you go up until it's these higher degrees of learning, and perhaps assimilating that learning increases your degrees of free will.
I think you're right there. I really think you're right. Right there. That's good.
Okay, so I want to cover this. We're close to the end. Can't believe it flew by. But okay, so you define different. You give these four coincidences. You talk about the analysis of different coincidences, and I just want to read them off. Okay, so the first being emotional charge. Coincidences usually provoke surprise, wonder, curiosity, or interest. Emotional charge creates a feeling of significance and meaningfulness. Number 2, parallel content. 2 or more elements of the coincidence signify the same or similar ideas or things. They have a meaning in common. Number 3, explanation. Coincidences usually trigger the question, what does this mean? This question can indicate a search for how the coincidence happened, its cause, or its explanation. And the last one, number 4, is use. The question, what does this mean, also indicates an attempt to understand the implications for the person's future, its personal significance. The coincidence implies something about a decision, whether to make it or not, a course of action, or a new possibility.
Those are the 4 meanings in a meaningful coincidence that you just were talking about. And it took me a while to be able to get the clarity that you just were able to read. It's fun to hear them again. But those are the 4 meanings. And I'm not, what are you asking me about them? I'm just glad you read them.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I'm trying to get a picture of this. If we can understand the realms of synchronicity, then perhaps we can start to establish the roadmap. And
Oh yeah, that's
but
what I'm trying to do.
but also, Sigmund Freud was sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right?
Right. Sometimes a coincidence is just something to not pay attention to, like me waking up with 444 on the clock. And some of them are just like funny. They're just like, what? Sometimes when that happens, I say, hey, you're playing with me again, right? It's like there are other elements around me that I sense that may be influencing what's going on with me. And that's what some of these coincidences that don't seem to have any particular personal meaning, but the meaning they do have is that I've been used to seeing the number 444 before. So it's kind of personally meaningful because I see a pattern being repeated. And that's different from the explanation problem or the even use problem.
So
Go ahead. What I'm trying to say is that I think I'm trying to do what you're talking about is how do we establish making coincidences more likely when we want to.
Okay. I love that. And that was leading me up to I was getting there, but okay, so negative coincidences. And these are a thing, right? We talk about this in the book. Why would that be necessary? Why would a coincidence be engineered to be negative?
There's a lot of different forms of negative coincidences. One of them you just talked about, which is hitting the wall when you're going forward, and there's nothing there, but it turns out to be a very helpful part of your life. It's called negative, but then when you look back, as I did with not getting tenure at the University of Washington, then you look back and say, boy, I'm sure glad that happened. So that negative can be negative at first, but turn out to be positive later. Some coincidences can be positive at first, like meeting the person of your dreams, and turn out to be awful later. So it's positive first and then negative later. Some of them are just awful. And one of the ones that is just awful has to do with the assassination of John Lennon. Mark David Chapman is the person who murdered John Lennon, and he followed a series of coincidences that led him to actually pull the trigger. On December 8th in 1980, Chapman was standing outside the apartment building in which John was living, the Dakota in New York City, in Manhattan. He had traced a series of thoughts that he had interpreted as coincidences. This was the building where the movie Rosemary's Baby was filmed. Rosemary's Baby was directed by Roman Polanski, who was the husband of Sharon Tate, another actress, who was 8 months pregnant with their unborn son when she was killed by Charles Manson's gang. The gang's favorite song was Helter Skelter, which was written by Lennon and McCartney. As he thought about these things, the actress Mia Farrow, who played the character of Rosemary in the movie, walked by. This meant to Chapman that today was the day to kill John Lennon.
Oh, wow. Huh. Sometimes I wonder, Dr. Bernard, are we insane? I mean, are we crazy to think about this stuff? I really think about, I mean, how do you even determine that? So because sometimes perhaps you signify, you give something meaning that has no meaning whatsoever. It's just a banana, just a cigar. It's just that. And yet you use it to propel your life in a certain direction that can be very negative.
The first part of that is we make up stories or patterns, see patterns that aren't there. That's the first part of it. The negative part can be next. There's a word for that now. It's called apophenia. That is seeing patterns that aren't there. I made up another word called cryptophenia, which means not seeing patterns that are there. And those are the two types of mistakes, I'll say, in pattern recognition that people can make. What you want to do is find out the ones that are really there, not making up ones or not missing ones. But then there's the question of making a decision. And sometimes it looks like a good choice to make. It doesn't seem like it's something you're making up. It looks like a coincidence that you should follow because it's so clear. And this is not making it up. This is like a coincidence that, well, I maybe should follow it. And that can lead you into a lot of trouble, following ones that you haven't thought clearly about enough to be able to do. I knew somebody who had lots of coincidences with a woman, and each one of them seemed like delicious, but following them meant he got closer and closer to her. And the closer he got to her, the more pain he felt. And a final coincidence was just running into her in a place where he kind of hoped that he would, and she just ignored him. And he almost got the message that time. It took him some time later to be able to figure it out. Coincidences that he wanted to have happen, but it didn't work.
So, Dr. Bernard, what if coincidences and these events are just like a sort of broadcast or like a signal? You know, they're like, if you were to say, I mean, I don't know if you've ever studied like just signal to noise ratio, right?
Yeah.
So what if coincidences are a signal that breaks apart the sort of noise, and you just, that's all it is. You know, it's just a signal, and humans, because we have this tendency to connect dots, you know, we connect whether it's positive, we connect whether it's negative, based on the events that surround those coincidences, those signals.
It's very, very important in answering that question to recognize that the human tendency to look for causes in correlations has a strong survival value. This is the way we figure out how things happen. Two things happen around the same time. Are they connected? The simple start is a baby cries and the mother comes. The baby begins to notice there's a coincidence between crying and the mother coming. Then he begins to notice there is a cause involved, that if he cries, she comes. And we do that in life all the time. Sometimes we make bad guesses about there being something there that's a cause, but it's the way this is the way we study reality in this matrix, is studying coincidences and seeing if we can find, by good scientific methods, if there is a cause that we can then apply into the future.
Okay. So you mentioned this earlier. I was saving this a little bit towards the end, but how do we generate luck? How do we generate, you know, the positive coincidences? Is there a meditation that we can do? Is there a mantra, a chant? I mean, how does it work?
And I have one more thing I want to bring up with you after this part. All I can do is talk about the circumstances that increase coincidentiality. I haven't been able to develop yet a way to actually make them happen. But when I say them, there are all kinds of coincidences that range from personally created, where I did it but I don't know it. And I have several stories that I can tell you about that. But people do coincidences, then blame it on somebody else or on something else outside of them. And then there is the telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition ones, and those are very real. And we don't know how they work, but we know that they happen. And we have good data to show that they happen. And here, it's only a matter of belief. If you can't believe they happen, then they don't happen. But simulpathity and so many other experiences suggest that telepathy is a real thing. And I like to think of of our technology as our modern technology, current technology, as like a reflection of our latent human capacities. That telepathy is like texting somebody, as well as the telephone, and that clairvoyance is like having a webcam. These are things that we are using, but we also have the capacity to use. But the fun ones for me, are not even those. Are the ones that are beyond telepathy and clairvoyance and precognition and maybe even psychokinesis. There's a mystery out there that I want to be able to help settle. The way you do it, the way you can increase them, that's all I can say, is what I mentioned about need and life stress and high emotion. But psychedelic drugs, you mentioned, you betcha, meditation, drumming, things that lower what some people call the filter between the brain and the greater consciousness. And that filter gets lessened in its strength, and our minds can go wandering out in the psychosphere, in our mental atmosphere. Stuff can happen. And just what it is that's happening out there when we do it is part of the fun of figuring out how this matrix we're in operates.
Amazing. I love it so much, so much, so much. You know, we were going to get back to the mental atmosphere, and I think that's really important. And I'm so glad that you mentioned psychedelics and psychedelic drugs. I was kind of wondering whether to ask you about that or not, but since you brought it up, it makes sense. It makes sense that would connect with this, because what if there is a larger reality that we are just accessing, and as you said, these compounds simply lower the veil. They simply allow us to see and connect past the veil. So it would make sense that perhaps it's adjusting your frequency or your resonance to a point where it would increase the amount of coincidences after you take a psychedelic drug, for example.
You betcha. You just start seeing more stuff. I was one of my best educations was on Haight Street in the late 60s, early 70s. And during that time, I was getting blown out by coincidences. I just had there were so many of them that I had to just stop. And so that flood of coincidences helped also my looking at this. One of the ways of thinking about what psychedelics do, you can go to something called the default mode network of the brain. And the default mode network is what goes on when there's nothing else going on. But it just keeps going. It's the default mode. It just keeps going. Blah, 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 blah. With psilocybin, that default mode network doesn't increase. It gets decreased. And I think of in activity. And I think of the default mode network as a possible analog of what I call the mind-brain membrane. There's a membrane between our brains and our minds and the psychosphere. This membrane gets loosened, as you're talking about, gets opened up under certain conditions that correlate with the default mode network being slowed down, and opens us up to the psychosphere, in which there's a lot of stuff happening. And we can get contact with it and do telepathy and clairvoyance and all kinds of other things as we get to know how that psychosphere operates.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It just fits the puzzle. The puzzle pieces fit here. I think even meditation would open doors to this. Chanting would open doors to this. So it really connects. And I mean, that's why I'm so grateful that we, found each other, really, Dr. Bernard, because I don't think there's anyone else that is picking up where Carl Jung left off. That's what you're doing here. And, I think you're building the legacy until at least we discover more. And I think really we're at a point where now we are sort of asking the questions that need to be asked, and science is getting to a point where they're starting to define the terms, and we're coming up with the connection between science and these other sort of realms of thought and energy. And then when you look at the current, sort of space of things, the global environment of things, it seems like we are on the precipice of disaster, global disaster. It feels like we are on the verge of something huge. I mean, the Vedas called it the Kali Yuga. Perhaps it's that, but it does feel like there's something in the air.
Oh yeah, and remember, need, life stress, and high emotion. We got all of those right now, as you just described. So the veil is being torn open of quotidian reality, and new stuff is coming in. And what I am doing is, you summarize so nicely. I'm writing another book that is called The Fundamentals of Meaningful Coincidences, and it's meant to be a textbook for a future class at Earth University on coincidences. And it's doing what you were saying. I am categorizing coincidences, the different kinds, the different uses, the different explanations, as a prelude to hopefully more people coming together to study them. Now, I'm not the only one writing about coincidence. There are more and more books about coincidences, about synchronicity and serendipity. There's even something called the Serendipity Society that had its first meeting in London. I went this past September, and where it's becoming an academic thing. Serendipity is. So there is a growing movement to study, and just the way you were talking about, I was delighted to hear the way you were saying it, Xavier, that we need to study scientifically, and science begins with categorizing the phenomena.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Dr. Bernard, we're going to wrap up here soon, but, can you imagine if we were in school and we learned about this in school?
Oh, yeah.
If we just were taught this. So I think that you're writing, something educational that could be, delivered into the hands of someone that could help them understand, all of this. And I don't want to, go down conspiracy lane too much here, but it does seem that in the system that we're in, this Earth life system, it seems like there is an oppression of information, of knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we have to be looking ourselves. And I think that's one of the main reasons that I created this show and bringing on, guests such as yourself, is because I want to give people the roadmap. I want to create that roadmap that we've all been looking for. And if you look at the shows, we've been doing that. So, Dr. Bernard, if we could, there's a lot of people are going to hear this episode. So, if we could kind of tie it into a bow and wrap it together somehow, that would be amazing. Just to wrap it up, is there anything that maybe we could tell someone that is listening that maybe needs a coincidence, maybe is looking for that meaning, maybe they're going through a hard phase in their life right now?
When you're going through a hard phase in your life, pay attention to the possibility that there will be help and assistance out there. It appears that many of us, I don't say everyone because I can't tell you this, can open ourselves up to being helped. I hear so many people saying that when they look, they find. You've got to be able to be open. The dog that trots about finds a bone. Keep moving, keep looking, keep imagining, because what you are needing can show up, and you have to be ready to look at it and seize it. Sometimes it'll be really quick and it's gone. You have to be ready. But when you're in need in a major life transition and you have a lot of emotion driving you, look around. You might find some love right there for yourself.
I love it, Dr. Bernard. Thank you so much for pursuing this work. And, really, you're so credentialed. I love this book. I can't recommend it more to anyone listening to this show right now. And if you're a fan of the show, you're going to really, truly love this book. Dr. Bernard, where can people find your work? Where can people get to your website? All of that, please.
The book is called Connecting with Coincidence, and it's on Amazon. There's an audio book that you can also get through Amazon. I have a Psychology Today blog. So if you're interested in following me in any way, just put Connecting with Coincidence in your web browser, and you'll find my Psychology Today blog. You'll find my website. You'll find my book, and you'll find my radio show.
Perfect. Guys, wow. What a show. I mean, I love these episodes so much, and we are spoiled. We're truly spoiled with such amazing guests and such good shows. The book is called Connecting with Coincidence. Dr. Bernard Beitman. We will make that link available for you guys on the website. Make sure you're on the mailing list of the website, thehumanxp.com. And if you want to find all of our links, if you want to join the community, you can go to allmylinks.com/thehumanxp. If you want to leave us a review on iTunes, please go do that. It's really, you do me a service. I mean, we're here every week, provide these shows for free. Take some time, go write a review for us. Also, spread the word, let your friends know about the show so that we can grow and more people find out about us. Otherwise, thank you so very much for your presence tonight. I really, really appreciate you guys that are loyal and stay true. I know there's a lot of you out there that are hardcore, diehard HXP fans, and without you, this is not possible. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back next week.